Reprise de débat. Resuming debate. L'honorable député de Laurentides-Labelle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to rise today to defend Senate Bill S-208, an act respecting National Steel Products Day. The issues in the industry have been well explained by the many speakers we've heard, so I won't repeat what they're saying. I agree with them. They're very good speeches. I seconded this bill, sponsored by my friend, my colleague, and my mentor, the member for Costa Bay Central Notre Dame. When he asked me if I would do it, there was no hesitation on my part, for while the population of seals in the Laurentians is decidedly low, it is an important issue close to my heart, one that I have been passionate about going all the way back to high school. And Speaker, there is a backstory to this that you probably won't hear very often. I grew up in a political family, not a partisan family, but political in the sense of getting involved in the community, in issues, in nation building, in our own little corner of the nation. For reasons of opportunity not germane to this debate, I attended high school at a boarding school in Massachusetts, received the maximum financial assistance from the school available to foreign students. There, at an institution founded in the latter half of the 19th century called Northfield Mount Hermon School, I met students from dozens of countries, and of course, as a teenager, I learned how to swear in many languages. But never did I swear so loudly as I did after the school invited, as a guest, a speaker on an issue that I, to that point, knew nothing about, and had not even heard of. So when Captain Paul Watson of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society spoke to the entire assembled student body about the need to destroy the sealing industry in Canada, and about how he had sunk 2 ships through his activities, more, he said, than the Canadian Navy itself had sunk since the Second World War, I twigged to a fundamental injustice. As a 15-year-old from rather far inland in rural Quebec, I did not yet know what the seal hunt was. Google did not exist. Websites were often turned off at the end of the business day. Wikipedia was 5 years away. People still used the Gopher protocol and had RFC 742 or finger profiles. And so information had to be gleaned in more traditional ways. But my instinct in listening to this energetic and by my fellow students very well received speech was that it did not add up. That the seal hunt no doubt was an important part of Canadian culture and a part of my country I knew nothing about. For me, it felt like an attack not only on a people or on an industry, but on my country. For me, I took it as an attack on Canada itself. I was never shy in school to identify myself as Canadian. Of over 1,100 students from around 75 countries, there were never more than a dozen from here. Most of my classmates referred to me by the nickname they gave me, Canada. And I can tell you that upon returning to Canada, it was a bit of a disappointment to lose that nickname. Though in a similar way, in the years I lived in Ontario, I was just as proud to identify myself as a Quebecer, which I consider to be an integral part of my identity, of who I am. Now at NMH, we were early adopters of technology. Jonas Reed Klein had graduated in the class of 1993, 2 years before my arrival. A very promising technologist, he went on to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that autumn. But tragically, he was killed in an unusual small plane crash in November of that year, knocked out of the sky in a collision with a skydiver. I never met Jonas, but my brother Jonah, who attended NMH before me, did know him. And one of the most important mentors in technology, my classmate Seth Schoen, who is now at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, met him and learned from him and passed on a lot of that knowledge and his passion. As a result of Jonas's very promising career and strong and by all accounts contagious interest in technology, his family set up a memorial fund at my school to promote the use of and education of technology. Had the series of events not happened, I would not be standing in this house today. The Technology Fund created 2 things. One was the technology package needed to create a campus club called GEEKS, a recursive acronym for Geeks for Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, which had a 386 running Slackware Linux on a 1.2 kernel, where I got my first Linux experience, which directly resulted in my first career as a technology journalist and news editor at Linux.com under the mentorship of Robin Miller, known in the technology world simply as Rob Limo, and made me probably one of the few people ever to use Lynx, the text mode web browser, professionally. The other was a system years ahead of its time called Swiss, the school-wide information system based on the first-class collaboration suite. By the end of my 9th grade in 1995, every student in the school had an email address which we could use on the Mac LC475s and 520s in the Cutler Computer Lab. Somewhere between a BBS and a social network, the system allowed students and faculty to interact electronically in what was then a very novel way with message groups on arbitrary topics. One of these groups was on food, essentially. Frequently, vegan advocates would argue for veganism, something they are well known to do. Their argument, which was not unfair, was that people should not eat meat without knowing where it comes from, that it is not justifiable to eat meat if you are not part of the process of how that meat ended up on your plate. Being a lifelong homesteader, my parents Joe and Sheila, any nearby Australians may want to take note of their names, were named among the runners-up for Mother Earth News Homesteader of the Year back in 2012. So I knew a thing or two about where meat comes from. My whole life, we have raised our own meat, vegetables, eggs, and so forth. Today, in our multi-generational household, we produce around 80% of the food we eat, when, of course, we're not here in Ottawa. So my argument back to these vegan activists was always, here's my connection to meat. And I would go into detail. Here's how to raise a chicken. Here's how to slaughter a chicken. Here's how to clean a chicken. Here's how to store a chicken. And here's how to prepare a chicken. And of course, this put the vegan activists in a really awkward spot. The general consensus and response from them on the Swiss message board was, nobody should eat meat except David. And there's the trouble. When a vegan or an activist or someone who is only against the seal hunt but will happily go eat a hamburger tells me or you, Madam Speaker, or any of our colleagues here, or our families, or our fellow citizens what we can and cannot eat, what we can and cannot produce, what we should or should not do, they are making assumptions about who we are, about what our experiences are, about what our realities are. In my years since, it has been important to me to learn about other people's experiences and realities, to become that much more worldly, and among many other things, to understand what the seal hunt actually is, beyond my baseline high school instincts. And I would invite others to do the same. When people all over the world tell our communities, who over millennia have become very much part of the ecosystem in our coastal regions, where managing the seal population does not only serve to feed a population directly, but also ensures fish stocks can survive the voracious appetites of our fellow predators, that this particular hunt is wrong and must result in a social and economic stigma that has nothing to do with reality. I believe that it is important that we use our technology to post on our worldwide information sharing systems what our reality actually is. The stigma has made it so that buying a seal meat in a grocery store or through a fishmonger, which should be possible, is not possible. I believe it is incumbent on people like us, parliamentarians, in our position of protecting the interests of our society, of our future, to respond in kind. To say, no, we do not accept the social and economic stigma based on no facts whatsoever, but only on a perception and on a quick political win where there is no real need to worry about the realities over there in Canada. No, we do not buy the argument that sinking more ships than the Canadian Navy as a protest against the livelihoods of our people is productive, fair, or justified. No, Speaker, we will not put up with these attacks on a Canadian way of life which goes back far longer than Canada as we know it. So, Madam Speaker, I believe it is very important for us to pass Bill S-208, to make May 20th National Seal Products Day, to make a statement that we defend our people and the way of life of our people, that we defend the livelihood of our people, that we will celebrate our culture, that we want to see our products succeed. This bill does not make a holiday, Madam Speaker, it makes a statement. It is a statement I am proud to make, proud to shout from the rooftops, and one I hope my colleagues will be proud to make as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat. We go to the right of reply by the sponsor, the honourable member for Coastal Bay Central Notre Dame.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I want to thank my colleague, my former employee and colleague. I didn't even write the speech for him. With all the technical words in it, I'm just not capable of doing it, quite frankly. But I want to thank him for that because he illustrates a very important point. Number one, it's not just a holiday, it is a statement. It's absolutely correct. And here is someone who has no connection to any of the communities that we've mentioned, whether they're in the north, around the coastal communities of British Columbia or Atlantic Canada, and he has managed to make a connection as a Canadian. A Canadian, all Canadians, over 30 million of us, to look at Seal Products Day as a necessary thing. And I also want to thank the other colleagues, and I'd like to mention some of them. Someone who did not get a chance to speak, but I want to thank the member from Nunavut, who has been, supplied many of the seal ties you see here today, and he has been truly an advocate. As a matter of fact, when he greeted the President of the United States, he was wearing a seal tie. So I think that's probably the first that's ever happened to an American president, hopefully not the last. To the member Dauphin, Swan River, Nipoa, I want to thank him very much because he brought forward the argument of wildlife management. And I want to share a story with him that there was a gentleman, one of my predecessors, he was a member of Parliament for Bonavista. His name was Captain Morrissey Johnson. He captained a boat himself and then became a politician. He was on Front Page Challenge, this television show on CBC, as a guest about the seal harvest, the seal hunt. And they asked him, they said, well, what makes you so convinced that these seals are eating fish? And his response was, well, they're in the ocean. They're certainly not eating turnips. Which was a very illustrative point, I thought. It was pretty good. So I want to thank him for that, and his vast experience in wildlife management, that certainly was educational. The member from Red Deer Lacombe, low incomes. Seal provide extra money for people with low incomes. Very true. He compared it to when Europeans who don't like the seal hunt and what it represents and the cruelty it represents, and then eat foie gras. And I don't have to illustrate how foie gras is made. I probably shouldn't, or else we wouldn't eat supper. But I do support that industry as well. Anyway, let's go out South Okanagan, West Kootenay. I hope I got the riding right. He talked about the coast-to-coast connection, his family being from Brigus, Newfoundland, sealers themselves, and then on the West Coast with the Nunavut, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and my colleague from Labrador. She does host Seal Day here. She has been a very extremely passionate advocate for it, and I thank her greatly for all that she has done. And she is certainly a champion for this, more so than I am, quite frankly. North Okanagan Shuswap, I also want to thank some of his comments. He talked about the EU ban and how unjust it was and how unfair it was, which goes back to the point that was made by my colleague from L'Unité Labelle about the fact that here you have people who look at this as being extremely cruel but have no problem wearing or eating other animal products without any idea where it comes from or how it is slaughtered or how it is raised. Yes, and of course, I also want to thank the colleagues around who questioned me during my first speech, and I want to thank them for that. But again, I remind you, this day, as my colleague pointed out, is not just about a day of celebration. It is a strong statement for our communities. There are exemptions in place in places like the European Union for cultural reasons, Aboriginal, First Nations, Inuit, but quite frankly, they still don't understand how this works, because they do have to sell this commercially in order to make things viable, as well as the Atlantic communities. So, all that being said, I want to thank the colleagues, all my colleagues in the House, for allowing me to bring this in. I want to thank Céline Havou-Payette, former senator, for being the genesis of this particular bill. It was my honor to bring it here. And I also want to thank the former member of Yukon as well, who also made a go at this and didn't quite work. But now we got it in the House for a vote, and let's hope this happens. So again, this bill, I stand here and vote for S-208 in the same way and in the same spirit I voted for C-501. And that is to protect our cultures tied around our wildlife and how we manage it and how we champion it as Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is as follows. Mr. Sims, seconded by Mr. Graham, move that Bill S-208, an act respecting National Seal Products Day, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Plaît-il à la Chambre d'adopter cette motion? Que tous ceux qui appuient la motion veulent bien dire oui. Que tous ceux qui s'y opposent veulent bien dire non. In my opinions, the yeas have it. Pursuant to Standing Order 93, the recorded division stands deferred until Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016, immediately before the time provided for private members' business. À l'ordre, à ce moment-ci, conformément à l'article 38 du règlement, une motion portant ajournement de la Chambre est réputée avoir été présentée et appuyée. En conséquence, la question est la suivante. Que cette Chambre s'ajourne